So today is the day. I finally get to review the OP1 8K for you. This has very quickly become one of my new main mice, and in this video you'll find out why. But first of all, I wanted to mention that only about 20% of you guys are actually subscribed, so if you're at all interested in peripheral enthusiast reviews, definitely go hit that sub button and the bell right next to it. And as a quick disclaimer, I do want to mention that the OP1 8K was indeed sent out to me by Endgame Gear themselves, but I have in fact bought this OP1 Wii with my own money just because I do in fact like this mouse and their shape and their coating that much. Getting into the very decent unboxing experience, everything is very eco-friendly. You get a small screwdriver that also, as a fun fact, has the same coating as the mouse itself. And you're wondering, why do you get a screwdriver with your mouse? That's because Endgame Gear is based as hell. These screws are completely exposed so that you can open up the mouse at any point of time, and you might be like, oh, but if I mount these larger style skates where it has these cutouts for, it's gonna cover them, right? Nope. They have holes in the skates. Based. You also do get some mediocre grips inside of the box as well, and that's already it. Perfect. Now in terms of weight, if you weigh it with the cable, it's around 51.5 grams, and without the cable it's around 48 grams. So if you just quickly want to get below those 50 grams, you could probably put on some dot skates, change the cord as well, and there you go. This mouse does in fact also have some pretty big modding potential with the base that you can cut out into, but I personally don't really see a need for it since I like this really insanely rock solid feel at around 50 grams. Talking about a rock solid feel, the QC on this thing is insane. As per usual with Endgame Gear, their mice are definitely catered to that esports type of rigidity, just like Vaxi does. There is no button grinding, no serious wobble whatsoever. The mouse is unstoppable, and yeah, it just feels like a Nokia, and if you were to throw this thing against the wall would probably shatter. In terms of the actual shape, please just go watch my video on the OP1 Wii, since I don't want to sound like a broken record. I'll make sure to list it up here and also down the description. I do quickly want to touch on the coating though, since it's just that freaking good. The coating is grippy to the point that when your hand gets warm, I almost found it too grippy because your finger just kind of sticks on the clicks. So if you've ever want like this insanely locked in feel with a coating and want to experience what that's actually like, go get this thing. I could see this coating being an issue for people who have like hypohidrosis or sweat like an insane amount. But if you're not in this insanely humid environment and don't sweat tons of liters every single day, this coating will most likely be the best you've ever felt. I define it as a mix between rubbery and chalky, more so chalky actually, and yeah, it's amazing. In terms of the buttons, especially compared to the OP1 Wii, this is so much better for the average user. The OP1 Wii clicks were insanely heavy compared to almost any mouse out there. The Kailh Go implementation at around 60 grams force was just way too much. And their new Kailh GX Switches that they've actually developed themselves together with Kailh, they feel perfect. They still do feel like a Kailh Switch, so you don't get that Wano blue shell pink dot feel that everybody knows and loves, but I cannot really see anybody have an issue with this click. It's still definitely spammable, but it's also not too heavy. And if you're curious about how they actually sound, stick around for the sound test. But if for some reason these clicks are still too heavy for you and you really prefer light clicks, you can buy a switch pack where you can just instantly swap these things out, and these will sit between 50 and 55 grams of force. For me personally, these were definitely too light, so I stuck with the stock switches. The side buttons have virtually no pre-travel. They do also have basically no post-travel either, and they're just very crisp. The scroll, in my opinion, is absolutely perfect. Not too heavy, not too light, it doesn't sound cheap, and mouse free is also pretty darn perfect in my opinion, especially since it's not too heavy. Now, something that we've never talked about in depth are switches. And the reason why we need to talk about these is because these were designed from ground up together with Kailh. And what makes these switches special is the way that they're actually built. These switches are built so that they can measure the activation from the release of the click at the very top of the switch. So this is how the switch actually works. You can see that this plate moves up and down, and instead of only measuring when it actually closes the circuit when pushing the pin down, it measures it as soon as it actually leaves the plate. up here, since this is connected to the circuit as well. Now, this can actually be either activated or deactivated inside of the configuration tool that your OP1 comes with. So if you do have issues with any sorts of double clicking or things like that, which I personally have experienced firsthand, and so has my friend Chris, you can either keep it deactivated as it is in the stock configuration, or you can wait for a future firm update that will most likely fix this issue. And whilst we got these bad boys out, I also wanted to show you how easy it is to actually swap out these switches. First, you just need to loosen these two screws at the bottom, then you can remove the base plate from the mouse. And in the top shell, you have these two PCBs for the switches of the main mouse buttons. These you can just unplug here from the PCB, screw these two screws out, screw in the new ones, and that's already it. Anybody of you will be able to do this if you just know how a screwdriver works. Just remember to never use any excessive force. Always just do it finger tight. And since we got the mouse opened, I also want to touch on the cable. You can indeed opt for a aftermarket cable, but definitely go do your research first. Most older 1K wires and paracords that we used to do probably simply won't be able to hold enough of a strong signal for 8K. At least that is what I have experienced already. So before you go buy a new cable and want to mod it, do your research or ask people over on Pericord, which is our Discord community for anything peripherals, and you can join it over at pericord.com. And now to probably the biggest turnoff on this mouse for anybody of you, the wire. For some reason, ever since we went wireless, people now are just scared shitless of having a cord again. Rest assured that if you have a mouse bungee and you know how to use it, I personally could not feel the wire in-game at any point of time, except if you accidentally edge the cable with your mouse because it comes underneath it, then you'll obviously feel it, but that has only happened to me twice so far. And if you don't actually know how to use a bungee, what I usually do is put it in at the end, then I put it to the back of my mouse pad here in the middle, put it in on top, make sure that I have plenty of room to put my mouse at the furthest corner, and then you want your mouse bungee to have a bit of slack here in the center so it can move around a bit, because if it's completely tightened, it does not have enough slack in order to twist and move around, and that's already it. I know that people on Twitter are still saying they can easily feel the wire, and it certainly also depends on what mouse pad you're using and if it copes well with this sort of texture that this paracord has, because if there is too much texture on your pad, there will be friction between the wire and the mouse pad, which will translate over to the feel inside of your mouse. For me personally, I have not had an issue with any mouse pads out there, so in my eyes the wire is a non-issue, and I actually prefer the feeling of the polling rate with a wire, and we'll talk about that very soon. But first we get into the skates. The skates are these dyed skates. Whenever I see dyed skates, I die a little inside, just like when I unboxed my Sprime yesterday. But they do sell 100% PTFE skates as well. I just wish that companies would start putting 100% PTFE skates on the mouse directly, so nobody would ever have to think about it. In terms of the battery life, I've never had to charge this thing ever. And now we get into the big topic, the polling rate. Something that has been a big topic this year are Mickey Mouse polling rates. So what I'm talking about is poorly implemented firmware that is made by people who don't really know what they're doing, and especially with wireless conditions, most of these advertised polling rates are never achieved constantly. So in order to actually do that, having a wire and completely homemade firmware by people who've actually done their homework, it is a night and day difference in some scenarios. When I first used it and actually compared it to a 1K mouse in terms of latency, even the motion latency I could clearly feel inside of Overwatch just by comparing them side to side. 8K wired with a homemade firmware just is that much better compared to a Chinese 1K solution. I'm not saying that every Chinese mouse out there is shit or anything like that. I just say that there is technically a difference, but at the end of the day, it won't make you a better gamer. It is just something that is like actually capable of saturating 8K polling rate at all times. So if you do have a 360 Hz or higher panel, I can definitely recommend picking something like this up if you want to experience what high polling rate actually can feel like in an environment that makes it work. And what is genuinely crazy about this thing is that it has 77 microseconds of an average click latency. This is absolutely unheard of. This mouse blows freaking anything out the water by switching the measuring units from milliseconds to microseconds. Yet again, I'm not saying that this will make you a better gamer, but if this doesn't show you how much Endgame Gear actually cares with this mouse, I don't know what will. If you want more in-depth knowledge on the OP1 8K and want to know how saturated this polling rate actually is and how insane of a technical standpoint this thing is, I would definitely recommend waiting for hausgaming's review, because he just does a much better job than me when it comes to these tech specs. So definitely go subscribe to hausgaming, turn notifications on, and wait for his review on this thing, because he will do some serious testing. In terms of the software, I will link it down in the description for you, but you can download this OP1 8K configuration tool. What this is just a portable executable where you can instantly change your liftoff distance, your DPI, turn motion sync on or off, and I would definitely recommend turning it off for a real 8K polling rate experience. Then you can also enable or disable the slam click filter. I've always had this disabled because it's only made my experience worse. And the most interesting thing is definitely the GX speed mode, which I was referring to when talking about these switches. When turning the speed mode on, you will achieve those 77 microseconds. I personally had double clicking issues even when putting it to the safe mode. I have heard that this will be able to be fixed in a firmware update, but for now, I personally have this off. And so do my friends who are still using this mouse. And you can indeed also change your binds. So yeah, getting into my opinions on this mouse, I think you've heard most already. In terms of wired mice, this is definitely my new main. And in terms of mice overall, this might just be my new symmetrical main as well. Mainly just because I feel that comfortable with the shape and having that more narrow feel in the hand compared to the HDS Plus that I normally main. It just feels that much better in game to me personally. Shape is king, and that is why I choose this thing over the HDS Plus at the moment. And having an 8K polling rate that actually works and isn't made by Disney is definitely something that gives you a lot of peace of mind when you do want to actually experience it. Especially since I have a 240Hz OLED panel, it is definitely not easy for me to find a difference between 1 and 4K on many wireless mice, but when comparing them side to side in aim trainers, I can feel it on this OP1 8K. This has been the very first time where I didn't feel like I was schizoing out when trying to compare polling rates. But then again, as I've said several times, it won't make you a better gamer. It's just something that you can feel a difference with when comparing it to other things. I also do think that in my opinion, I'd go for the OP1 8K any day of the week over the OP1 Wii, mainly just because I don't have an issue with the wire. But if you don't care about the polling rate and don't mind the additional weight, I would go for the OP1 Wii instead, since it's still very affordable in its category, in my opinion, for what you actually get in terms of hardware and being sold out of Germany and not a manufacturer-owned brand that's located in China. Also, if you just want to do a lot of modding or base cuts or swap out the base and change the battery, since this is a 1K mouse, you can definitely get this thing down to 50 grams as well, and then you'll have about the same experience just in 1K with this wireless version. Just do note that the clicks on the OP1 Wii are very heavy out of stock, and I definitely would recommend getting the switch pack. Also, a huge thing that I missed out on telling you about is the hot swap switch pack. So you can just put in any mechanical switches that you'd like. All you have to do is screw out those 2 screws from the bottom that are accessible at all times with your screwdriver that is actually included in the box. Screw out the 2 screws on this PCB, and then you can just swap the switches instantly. That is such a freaking nice thing to see. And that is also why I believe that currently this is the most enthusiast grade mouse yet. And what I mean by that is the screws are accessible, it has an insane build quality, the wire is basically as good as a stock wire gets, you can swap out your switches at any point of time with these switch packs, you can even have hot swappable switches, they have 100% PTFE skates for sale, they encourage you to open up this mouse, they have a portable software. What more do you want? The only thing more I could see would maybe be a web-based software in the future, but Endgame Gear have done so much in-house with this mouse compared to basically any other brand. And that is why I deem this the most enthusiast grade mouse yet. That is until maybe the FCC one by REA comes out, but until then, this holds a very special place in my heart. Now, to the conclusion. Who is this mouse for? If you don't mind really good stock wires and want to have a real high polling rate experience, get this thing. If you've always wanted a mouse that is really good for either fingertip, relaxed claw grip especially, or an aggressive claw grip that is also very narrow towards the front, get this thing. If you for some reason just hate straight wires, don't get this thing. And also, if you have hands bigger than 19 by 10, I wouldn't get this unless you play a fingertip grip. 19 by 10 is definitely edging the borders of possibilities here in this mouse, but of course that changes. When you play a fingertip grip and have much more viability. Other than that, it's basically impossible to find flaws with this thing. Sitting at 75 euros, I think this price is more than justified. You cannot grasp how expensive it is to do a fully in-house custom firmware. And on top of that, also creating your own switches from the ground up. People saying that this thing is overpriced do not understand how this world runs. This company is based in Germany. They have German VAT, which is 19%. They have to pay an insane amount of sales taxes. And you really want to compare that to somebody who makes everything in their own factory in-house over in Shenzhen? That is just stupid. If you're not happy with the price, then just don't get it. There's no reason to hate on it, because if they were to put their price any lower, they'd go bankrupt. Imagine the wages alone that they have to pay all these European people compared to what the wages are like over in China. But yeah, other than that, that's about it for this video. If you've enjoyed it at all, please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell right next to it to be notified of any of my upcoming reviews. And until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.